So, Tom, Ahsoka is here, and you know what that means? We're going to plan out a 20-minute podcast, then ramble on and make it an hour long. So, Tom, what did you think to Ahsoka these first two episodes?
In one word, I would have to say it's underwhelming. What about yourself?
Contrived. I would agree with the underwhelming and also contrived, or maybe a bit of bipolar as in there as well, because there are certain things that I do like about this
Hmm.
show, but not a lot. Anyway, so on to what we liked. What did you actually like about this show? Because I'm imagining this list is a bit shorter than the things that you didn't like.
Yeah, it's short, but not as short as this podcast is going to be. So, uh, a few things I did like. I did like Ray Stevenson's Jedi character. I thought it was a good introduction for a character that very clearly had Jedi ways, isn't evil, but does look at things through a pragmatic lens,
Yeah,
from my understanding.
he's like a true Dark Jedi. Like in the lore before Disney took over, Dark Jedi were basically they weren't Sith. They didn't follow the Sith code. They didn't give a crap about any of that. It was just they were Jedi that looked out for themselves. Basically, they were just selfish. And you did often find them sort of fulfilling the roles of like bounty hunters and headhunters and assassins and so forth. So it kind of does fit with the old Legends lore. I really liked him too. I thought he was a good menacing presence. I kind of like his apprentice as well, Shin. I think Shin's quite. She just looks like a psychopath, and I kind of like that. She's just got this glassy psychopathic stare
Hmm.
that really like sells her as someone not to mess with.
Well, speaking of Dark Jedi, what's the difference between a Dark Jedi and a Grey Jedi then?
Grey Jedis don't exist. That's the difference.
What are you saying?
Grey
Dark
Jedi.
Jedi exists?
Well, Dark Jedi used to be a thing in the lore. Like Grey Jedi's never really been a thing. We did a little short on this,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you're going to link it in a second. We did a short on this, but Grey Jedi it's been like mentioned once in a book, and but Dark Jedi in Legends was all over the place. It was basically just a Jedi that wasn't a part of the Order and didn't give a crap about the Sith and was just interested in their own interests, basically. They followed their own pursuits and had morally dubious inclinations.
And that's a Dark Jedi.
Yeah.
Because,
Asajj Ventress could kind of... the new lore kind of made her into a Sith acolyte, but
yeah,
like in the older lore, she was a Dark Jedi. Asajj Ventress was a Dark Jedi.
because Dark Jedi was initially the term they probably banded around because they didn't have the term Sith yet.
Yeah.
Because it gets funny when you're listening to the Heir to the Empire audiobooks and whatever, and they start referencing Dark Jedi, and it's like, you on about Palpatine's clone? You mean the Sith Lord?
I mean, yeah.
But obviously, that trilogy of books, or the Heir to the Empire books, predates the Phantom Menace, where the term Sith was thrown around, wasn't it?
There is a clip of an outtake of A New Hope where I think Palpatine or Vader is actually mentioned to be a
Hmm.
Sith, believe it or not. But yeah, it wasn't like canonized
Yeah.
until the Phantom Menace.
That clip obviously didn't make it down to the writer's
Yeah.
room for the expanded universe, eh?
No, no.
But back to other things I liked, because I did enjoy Ray Stevenson's performance. It's rather bittersweet. And
Yeah.
the droid, I
Oh, Hugh Yang.
yeah, David Tennant, the voice, the Doctor. I enjoyed his character. He had some funny put downs, as matter of fact speaking, and I've missed his Clone Wars arc, because with the Clone Wars, I watched it on and off because
Yeah.
people tend to look at that show with rose-tinted glasses because you always think, oh, the Siege
Yeah.
of Mandalore, this arc, the Darth Maul arc where he returns.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
think of the peaks, but there's a lot of valleys in that show.
Yeah, there is a lot of garbage and filler.
For example,
Without a doubt.
when we had to make that Mace Windu video about Vapad,
Yeah.
I had to get footage from the Mace Windu episodes, but they teamed him up with Jar Jar. And I'm watching the episodes, I'm like, God, these are really bloody painful to get through.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
Yeah, there's some turds. There's some turds in that rose bush. That's for sure.
So I've
Um,
definitely missed his arc, but he does seem reminiscent of the character in the Jedi Survivor game. There's a droid, a Jedi droid. Uh,
oh,
like, I think there's a lot of parallels between Jedi Survivor and this show because,
I haven't played Survivor yet, so I can't comment.
damn, uh, I think there is. Oh, I can't even spoil it. Sorry. So Jedi Survivor, they find like another place. They have to go through like I'm gonna say a wormhole. You know how they get to Exegol?
Yeah, yeah,
They have
yeah,
to go through like this BS to get there. Similar setup for this planet in Jedi Survivor, where they have to do some BS to get to this new planet, and it's going to be like a sanctuary, you assume, for like the
yeah,
Jedi Order to rebuild. It's like, oh, we've got a map. We found a sanctuary for us to live in peace. Here, it's like we've got a map to find Thrawn, who's in another galaxy, which is hard to reach, apparently.
yeah,
Uh, it was just, and obviously the Jedi droid that knows the Order and its secrets and stuff like that. There's lots of parallels between them. It's like, oh, this is got some weird crossover, so to speak. But I did enjoy
yeah,
the droid. I thought he had some funny lines and he was quite natural. Uh,
yeah. He was great. Probably the best character that's been like sort of dragged into this show because I'm sure we'll get onto when we talk about things we didn't like
and
about characters we don't think have transitioned so well.
And the last few things I did note that I did enjoy, the visual effects for the most part were very good. I liked seeing the weird star map and the galaxies and the way they were portraying things.
Yeah,
The ships, like Star Wars and ships, just the peak of the industry.
yeah,
Like ILM have just got this knocked down. Uh,
yeah,
you
absolutely.
you just don't see that quality elsewhere. And
No.
you've got other things like the sound design. The sound design's fantastic. And
Mm.
as we say, the music, the
Yeah,
composer's done a yep.
for me, that's what I'll talk about a little bit. The score is a big one for me in terms of things I like because it's honestly like Kevin Kinner went to Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy and Filoni and said, "What do you want me to do? Should I do something like The Mandalorian? Should I do something like John Williams? Should I do something like Book of Boba Fett? Should I do something like KOTOR?" And they just went, "Do all of it." And you really hear that, like, there's just there's even a little bit of Game of Thrones, I think, in the end credits theme,
Yeah.
but just there's all these different feels, like, and there's no Andor theme in there as well, which I can't we'll do a podcast about Andor one day. I can't stand the score for that. But with this, it just felt like it's so Star Warsy, apart from one exceptionally jarring moment, which we'll talk about. The score is just it's beautiful and like how they sort of weave that sort of whimsical John Williams into that sort of tribal Mandalorian-esque, that sort of Gorinson sort of sound. And even with the John Williamsy scores, there's a really nice blend I found of sort of stuff that was reminiscent of the prequels, but also stuff that was reminiscent of the original trilogy. And yeah, that KOTOR sound. There's a Jeremy Soule. There's just a little bit of that Knights of the Old Republic flair, and I just think it's the most Star Warsy score we've had in these TV shows so
Hmm.
far, and it just takes everything, and it's wonderful. For me, other things that I like, I do like the main plot. I like there's things I don't like about it, but I do like how there's supposed to be the sense that there's this ticking time bomb going off and that there's going to be a big explosion if it's allowed to go off, and I'm sure that it will go off. And that is, of course, like the build up to Thrawn, like how we have to stop him now. Um, but when we get into things we didn't like, we'll talk about how it's not being handled the greatest. But I like the premise of that. I like how we've got to stop Thrawn. It's a race to stop Thrawn. Um, I like Like you, I like the Dark Jedi characters. I like Rosario Dawson, but I'm still not convinced that her Ahsoka is the same Ahsoka from Rebels and the Clone Wars, and I think you feel kind of the same, don't you? She's extremely stoic, extremely cold, and there's none of that flair to the character that like Ashley Eckstein like imbued into Ahsoka. There's none of that pluckiness that is very endemic to Ahsoka's character.
I would agree with that. Are we moving on to things we didn't like? I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, you finished like all you like. It's like, oh, we've just whiplashed from one to the other here, right? I was like,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah, I didn't it's not really something I like, but I didn't hate Hera. I liked Chopper.
Hmm.
Um yeah, that's well, we can move on to things we didn't like.
Okay. Because I was like, whoa, Liam, I'm trying to stay structured here. I'm trying to stay in things we did like. And you're here already banging but didn't like job. I was like, come on,
Yeah.
slow down. Uh, so things we didn't like. Well, you know what? Why don't I let you continue your thoughts there? Because you spoke about the actors and the performances
Yeah.
as the characters of people we know already. So,
Okay. So I did not hate Hera's appearance. I didn't think it was awful. But like Dawson, I don't think I'm still not convinced that that's Hera from Rebels. That I don't think the actor's quite got the mannerisms down. I think she's the original Hera was quite world weary and very motherly, and this Hera seems a bit too plucky and a bit too smiley, and it just hits me that that's not Hera. But the biggest crime for me is it's got to be Sabine. Like she was the most perfect casting in terms of the superficial, in terms of looks. She looks pretty much, like a live action version of the animated
hmm.
counterpart for Sabine. But God, the character has just been butchered. And I'm not even going to blame it all on Filoni and the writing staff. The actress as well was just terrible. It just, the whole time I was watching her, I couldn't stand her because it just felt like she could not be bothered with what she was doing. And I suppose it also comes down to the cringe-inducing dialogue and that intro as well. Like, I'm all for a bit of rock in Star Wars if it fits the theme of Star Wars, but that intro and they were trying to like build her up as this big rebellious punk, and it was just awful. Like rock music can work in Star Wars. Like we saw that in Jedi Fallen Order with the Who. But the
Hmm.
reason it worked with the Who and Black Thunder, their the song that you hear in Fallen Order, is because the Who they have a metal sound, a heavy metal sound, but they also mix in these really obscure Mongolian instruments and Mongolian singing techniques and throats singing and drums. So it sounds really bloody alien and unique, and it just fits in Star Wars. Whatever they were playing over the top of Sabine's introduction was awful. It just didn't fit, and it just made the character. It just aided in this character coming across as this try hard punk. And it's like that's not Sabine. As someone who watched Rebels as a guilty pleasure, even though they were a bit too old for it. It was just it didn't feel like the same character at all. It just felt butchered. The Jedi training, why? Um, yeah, I'm sure you've got thoughts on this too, Tom. It's Sabine just the biggest gripe I suppose I have with this show at the moment. I'm hoping things change, but yeah, not a good start.
I think that's a major problem with translation between animation and live action is these characters are started off as animated characters, cartoon characters, and translating that to live action can have its problems. Uh,
Hmm.
so here, if you was to compare the acting here compared to the animation, you'd say it's a lot more understated, uh, almost, but also they fit into like an archetype. So Sabine's like this rebel, they do like stupid shit. It's like,
Yeah.
look at me, I'm a rebel. It's like, it's a little cringy. Whilst if you
Yeah.
looked in the animated versions of these characters, they're full of life, but they
Yeah.
they probably have to be so full of life because they only have like 20 minutes to tell a story. It's like we and it's for a child audience, so it's like we have to be very expressionate in what we do.
Another thing I didn't like is the contrived writing.
Mm.
Um, I'm sure you've got thoughts on this too. I could not stand that intro. Really bugged the crap out of me because it had me at first. It had me. So obviously the rebel prisoner ship is there, and this smaller ship starts hailing them, and the captain's like, "Oh, who is it?" And they're like, "Oh, it's a Jedi. It's an old Jedi clearance code." And he goes, "Yeah, I'll meet them." And but he has the sense to send a security team. And I was like, "I buy this. You've got me, show. I buy this because obviously the Jedi are quite mythical at this point. They're legends. They've sort of faded into legend." I could see the captain being like, "Oh wow, it's my opportunity to meet a Jedi," and being really sort of inquisitive about it. The second he revealed that he knew that they were Empire, or well, the baddies all along, I just honestly, I face palmed while I was watching it because it makes no sense. It's contrived writing. It was just to give us a cool scene where it's like we're no Jedi, and I absolutely hated it. If a small ship is flying towards your ship and it's hailing you, and you know that it's they're imposters, but they're trying to persuade you that they're not, any general, any military personnel with any logic or sense knows that whatever's on that little ship is confident that it can take on whatever's in, on your big ship. You space it, don't you? You dust it, you blast it out of the sky. It made no logical sense to try and play this game with them.
Hey,
Um,
you play stupid games, you win silly prizes or whatever that is.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It made absolutely no sense. You're also transporting a high value prisoner, so you can't you don't play those games. It just made no sense. It really took me out of the moment and really made me hate that captain character a lot.
well, as you said, a lot of the problems with this show, the two episodes, are down to the script and the story.
Yeah,
They're just, it's just not very great. And it's simplistic without being interesting.
yeah,
Uh, there's a lot of setup, but it's not very interesting setup. It's as if we're going through the motions, and even
yeah.
the actors feel like they're going through the motions. Nobody seems engaged by what they're doing.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Self-indulgent, I'd call it. It's very self-indulgent. It's like I
I
feel like Filoni feels like his characters have this sort of complex characterization that you sort of find in like Game of Thrones, so they can get away with like moping around and talking. But people don't realize how smart a writer George R. R. Martin is, and
mm,
how intricate and clever and charismatic his characters are. They can get away with doing that. Star Wars characters, with a rare few exceptions like Thrawn and Traya, and potentially Dooku in the old EU, and Yoda to a certain degree, you can't get away with it. You can't have them sitting and chatting and going through the motions because they're not deep enough.
they're certainly not, and the way they do it is very clunky.
Yeah.
Uh, I I'm just quickly looking at the episodes, and he's written all eight. We're in for some
No.
wild ride, boys. Uh,
Yeah. I
because
mean, this show really does feel like Filoni's been let off the leash. Um,
now
like George Lucas, he made the original trilogy, but he had people on the original trilogy telling him no, and then we had the prequels come along. And while I have a soft spot for the prequels, I can admit they're flawed. And the reason they're flawed is because no one told him no. And for me, this is Filoni's like Phantom Menace. This show, it's where he's finally been given full control, and no one's saying no.
it's it's surreal because a lot of the sequel trilogy, Kennedy gets blamed. Yes,
Yeah,
she ultimately gets up blame. whether you agree with it or not is another question. When it comes to the Mandalorian new series, and they she gets none of the credit, which I always find amusing. Because
Mm,
if you're going to give her all the blame for the sequel trilogy, but none of the credit for the Mandalorian stuff, then it's a weird double standard. And
yeah,
I think if you've been listening to this podcast when we did our Mandalorian season 3 review, there are cracks already forming in like the early seasons of The Mandalorian. But
yeah,
because people were so enamored with that first season of The Mandalorian, they looked over the cracks because
yeah,
there are quite a few duds in that first season. If you look at that first season and the third season, the same things we criticize season 3 for, they do in season 1.
mm,
So we talk about not moving the plot forward, uh, not getting on with things, and having dud episodes like the prison episode in season 1. That was
yeah,
like the Lizzo episode in season 3. They
yeah,
they have those cracks, but because its competition was the Rise of Skywalker, everyone was like, "Oh wow, the Mandalorian looks so much better in comparison," and it gave
yeah.
us some characters really enjoyed. Like Grogu was a surprise. I didn't know about Grogu before I watched The Mandalorian. Like that was surprising to me. Was it a surprise to you when you first saw Grogu?
I had it spoiled by the bloody internet, but, yeah, I would have been
It
very, very surprised. I found him intriguing, like, I didn't have who he was or what he was doing
Yeah.
spoiled, so I thought that was intriguing, like, how Mando found him and things.
But what I'm saying was like it was a big surprise because I just thought it was going to be a mission of the week. Mando goes kills this guy. Next week is going to go kill that guy. It's just villain of the week type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
But they introduced Grogu. Like, whoa, what's going to go on here then? Like, because I didn't read the backstory. But now it's like, okay, who gets the blame for Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian season 3? Because I honestly think Filoni and Favreau uh, have kind of been able to duck it for the most part.
I agree, but that you still get people saying that Filoni should run Star Wars, should be put in charge, put in Kathleen Kennedy's spot.
I
He's
so
not.
no,
Yeah.
I fundamentally disagree with that statement so much because
Like, I get that he understands Star Wars to a degree, and I get that, like, supposedly he was quite, like, close with George and stuff. I get that, but he's a bit of a madman when you look at that. You have y people like you said earlier, people take the Clone Wars gems, they don't actually think about all the duds.
yeah,
And, yeah, you give Star Wars over to Filoni, you're gonna get a few gems, but you're also gonna get an awful lot of just barren rocks
it's
as well.
one of those things where I would have to go back and see Filoni's, what should I say, contributions, like his writing
Mm,
contributions, his direction contributions, and judge those episodes uh, in of themselves, not as the larger
yeah,
whole. So I wouldn't be like, oh wow, the final season of the Clone Wars was so amazing. It's like, no, the last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars were amazing. What was his
yeah,
contribution there? And he was the writer for the last 4 episodes. Like, okay, he can write really great stuff. Like, that's
yeah,
evidence of that. I agree. Like, he can write really fantastic stuff, but he did not direct those last 4 episodes. I'll be like, okay. So when I'm watching those confrontations with Maul and Ahsoka, I'm thinking the director is getting the emotion, the shots, evoking all these feelings from you. And I don't get that in the live action show of Ahsoka. Like, I don't feel anything for these characters.
no,
And because it doesn't feel true to the characters
no,
or my understanding
doesn't
of
at
them.
all. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like this whole thing with Sabine, they've established that she's been trained, but you go all the way back to Rebels, and there's nothing. There is this tiny little moment, if my memory's serving me right, it might not even exist, but I do recall when Kanan was training her to use the dark saber, he was like, "You don't have the Force like me and Ezra do, but you can kind of still listen to it
Mm,
and let it guide you." That's it. So this show is, like you said before we did the podcast, like it's setting up this backstory that there's no basis for.
yeah.
Like, it had never been addressed in Rebels once that Sabine was going to be a Jedi, or that she had the potential to be a Jedi. So we have this rich backstory, but instead of pulling from that, we're pulling from backstory that we haven't seen that's happened off screen.
But that's what I mean. It's if you're coming at this as an audience member who's watched Rebels, you're scratching your head at the idea of like Ahsoka and Sabine with like a duo,
Exactly.
and it just does not fit like my head. Maybe I'm being small-minded, but if I'm coming at this from an audience who hasn't seen Rebels, which might be a large percentage of the audience, they might be like, "Oh, okay, so Ahsoka had an apprentice, but they kind of fell out." Okay, it's like weird how you're gonna try and mash that together and make it gel, because
Yeah.
there's lots of long stares and awkward moments, and it's like all Hera does is be a hologram and stare at people. It's like, I'm Counselor
Yeah.
Hera today. Why don't you unload all your baggage on me today, Ahsoka? Like, let me hear about your past. It's like, so we're gonna bring up Anakin. I was like, bro, you knew Anakin for like 3 years at most. Get over
Yeah.
it. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. It's like, yeah, they have this bond, but at this point, it's probably 30 years ago.
Yeah.
uh,
And it is true. She only knew him for 3 years. The Clone Wars was only 3 years long.
exactly. So
So
it's these weird wedging in backstories and elements that don't quite fit. And
yeah, it's sloppy as well. It's very sloppy, dull, dumb, dull and dumb exposition. That's the word I was
I
looking
was like,
for.
I was gonna save you, but I was like, no, I'm trying to understand what you're getting at here, like dumb and dull, dumb and dull, exposition. But yeah, it's sloppy in how it's done because Ahsoka is a good character. Like I can agree with that, but I think she's being wedged in
Yeah,
uncomfortably into certain roles that aren't for her. It seems to be a lot of conflicting messaging. So it's like,
yeah,
I'm not a Jedi. I've left this path behind. It's like, I don't understand then what was you and Sabine?
yeah,
Like, we keep bouncing back between like Rebels. She's not a Jedi. She's left the order. Cool. Mandalorian. Oh, I'm not a Jedi. You want Luke Skywalker for that. Cool. But between Rebels and Mandalorian or Return of the Jedi, she in fact was taking on an apprentice. It's like, I know having an apprentice or Padawan doesn't have to be mutually exclusive to like being a Jedi, but that's the connotations that were given.
yeah.
Uh, so
I don't think they know what to do with her, if I'm being honest. Like, Filoni has a raging hard on for Ahsoka because it's like his first massive original character, isn't it?
yeah,
And I think I have to be honest, Ahsoka's story ended when she tried to turn Anakin back from the dark side and she failed. And the temple collapsed on her and Vader, and only Vader came out. That was the end of Ahsoka's story.
so
She wasn't the one to turn him back to the light.
that's where I'd love to stop you right now. So these are the top five things I think of when I think of Filoni. So the Clone Wars as a whole, like that's
Yeah.
Filoni. Then you've got the Siege of Mandalore arc at the end. I'm calling it the
Mm.
Siege of Mandalore. It might be the wrong name for it. The one with Maul and Ahsoka. Then I would think of Rebels, and then I would think of the Mandalorian. He is
He's that's
almost he's almost on par with me with Zack Snyder. So
yeah.
Zack Snyder has this fan base that's rabid for him, but they don't show up for his films, so it's hilarious. And
Yeah.
it's like he's got such a rabid fan base, but they can't accept it's not right. Like Zack Snyder's Justice League is just not great.
Yeah.
Uh, Filoni, I would say, is mm, a bit better than Snyder in that regard, but he does introduce elements that I strongly disagree with. And I don't know why it's so hard for people to take on Star Wars and not fundamentally change things, but just tinker. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't need a world between worlds. Like, absolutely didn't need that at all. Think of a creative way to get Ahsoka out. It's like, well, that is creative. Like, no, that's cheap. Like,
The creative way to, if we're talking about that fight, the creative way to get Ahsoka out was to have Vader spare her.
mm,
They had a certain like if there was this bond that like Filoni pushes between Ahsoka and Anakin, just have Vader have this minor moment of mercy. Maybe not, maybe not mercy as in helps her up, but maybe crushes her under some rocks and decides to walk away.
yeah.
There was getting her out without introducing that stupid time travel
But
crap.
you
Yeah.
also you also wonder what is Ahsoka's power level? It's a bit nerdy, but it's so obscure you can't.
Yeah, I would say that this is something I kind of actually liked about these two episodes. You have Sabine and you have these two new Dark Jedi, and it is clear that Ahsoka has been around longer and is better trained and is like I'm gonna bash the fight choreography when we get
Mm,
onto that, but like you do get the sense that Ahsoka knows what she's doing a hell of a lot more than everyone else, and I kind of like that because she is at that age where she should kind of be a bit like a Jedi Master now. But her power level has always kind of been that she's almost a bit like Anakin, but not the chosen one. So from my recollections of the lore when Clone Wars came out, she was supposed to be a bit of a prodigy, but also had a lot of Anakin's faults, and that's why she was sort of palmed off on him. Um,
which kind of makes no
because she
sense,
was
eh?
yeah, because she was supposedly extremely talented
Yeah,
and quite gifted, but yeah, many of Anakin's like arrogance and impetulance and stuff. So
yeah.
Yoda was like, take her Anakin, and hopefully you improve each other, which is dumb. But then the Jedi in the prequels are quite dumb, so
But
makes sense.
that's what I mean though with like her power levels because when she fights Inquisitor looking dude, she doesn't break a sweat.
Yeah,
Like she's handling him. It's like, okay, so he's troublesome for like some not some very talented people, but she'll just run through him. So you
yeah.
think, okay, she's stronger than him. But where is she in relation to Luke Skywalker? Because Luke Skywalker should be like the pinnacle.
Oh, Luke is even in the new canon. Luke is undeniably like the most powerful Jedi to live. Like even the Last Jedi does him so dirty, but you have to remember that throughout that film, he's actually like mentally cut himself off from the Force. But he does sort of become the most powerful Jedi.
Now,
Um,
if
but yeah, no, Luke would trash Ahsoka. Ahsoka would not die instantly, but that's about as good as
so,
she's gonna do against Luke.
check this out. I reckon they would do like Luke's the most powerful Jedi, but not the most powerful Force user. I could see them doing
Yeah.
like some little fidgety stuff there. I was like,
Yeah.
what? So anyway,
Yeah, even though his dad's like, made of the Force,
yeah,
basically is half made of the Force.
he's got his mother's
Um,
weakness.
yeah,
So we have diverted a bit there, but
yeah,
that's where I'm saying about Filoni, where he's wrote this entire season. It's gonna
yeah,
rest on his shoulders. He's gonna get all the blame, in my opinion, or
yeah.
all the credit.
And I think it is. I think it is gonna be. I think it is gonna be blame. Like moving on to other things I didn't like.
Yep.
I'm getting really fed up with lightsabers. In these live action shows, they're starting to become lame. Really, really lame. everyone is raving about that hallway scene. Oh, it's like the Vader scene from Rogue One.
No, it's not.
No, no, it's not. His actions, his movements are so awkward, and it was the same with the lightsaber fight as well between Sabine and Shin. I really miss Nick Gillard who did the prequels, and I really miss Bob Anderson who did the original trilogy. Like, you can lambast the prequels as much as you like, and the lightsaber fighting, but there's some fundamental idea of swordsmanship in there. Like, as someone who's done sword fighting, done a bit of kenjutsu, done a bit of hema, it's not totally ignored. It's 100% theatrical, and yeah, there's moments where you could stab, like Anakin could have stabbed Obi-Wan in the back when he's spinning and stuff, but there's still this element of that's a believable sword fight to an untrained eye.
Hmm.
There's actually a video on YouTube by a guy called Shad from Shadiversity, and he's like a HEMA enthusiast and stuff, and he actually slows the fights down and breaks them down, and sort of points out that, yeah, while this is impractical for, you know, a normal person to do, if you were a Jedi and you had enhanced speed, you could get away with doing a spin there because it would make sense because you can move so fast to go with the momentum and stuff. And you just see that when those fights are slowed down, you see their care put into them. And obviously with the OT, you had Bob Anderson doing the choreography for Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and that guy was, you know, an Olympic fencer, and you know, he also did the Princess Bride sword fight scene. He's, you know, the greatest fight choreographer for sword fights, just period, basically, in Hollywood.
Hmm.
These ones were awful. These ones are really, really bad. The one between, like, the hallway scene with Balon, that just really awkward looking, and the fight between Sabine and Shin, so awkward. There's like these pauses. It's just really simplistic over the head slashes and sideways slashes, and there's these pauses and the footwork. As again, as someone who's done sort of like that, it's just all absolutely terrible. Like, and you can get away with those sorts of movements. You can get away with that simplistic movement, like in the Mandalorian season 2 with Luke. When Luke shows up and wrecks the Dark Troopers, you do have those little awkward movements and pauses, but you can get away with that in the Mandalorian because of one, how it's shot. It was shot in a more dynamic way for me because obviously
Hmm.
they were trying to hide his identity, but also Luke is so unbelievably powerful that kind of makes sense for him to have these little pauses because he's not even trying. There's that element of it works because this character doesn't need to put in any effort to trash these droids. But when you've got Sabine and Shin fighting and it's supposed to be quite high octane, like they're supposed to be going for it, it just looks awkward and stilted. And I like, you're a visual guy, pal. Like, the camera angles are just, they don't help either. There's no dynamic flow to the fight.
Hmm.
It's clunky, and like I say, it looks very flat, and the camera angles, like again, you mentioned before we did the podcast how they shoot from like over the shoulder, don't they? So you're obscuring the action.
Like,
I'd rather have. I'll let you go
hmm.
on to do your point, but I'd rather have just do one. Just have one lightsaber duel in the whole season, but get someone in who knows what they're doing. Get stunt actors and make it really good, rather than having this quantity over quality garbage.
So I think that's the issue they've got is they're trying to stretch the story over 8 episodes, and I don't think it fully works that way
Yeah,
because maybe he's just a limited storyteller. Like The Mandalorian, you look at those stories, they are very simple.
yeah.
It's like,
They work because of the intrigue of Grogu, don't they? They work as well because of Pedro Pascal's acting with the puppet. Like, their bond is really encapsulating, isn't it?
yeah.
And
But
the mystery surrounding Grogu sort of pushes those side missions along, if that makes sense.
but they're very simple as a weekly basis. But when you're trying to build up like a tapestry, like a story, and all the
Yeah,
threads, you think, we need to be a bit more complex here to weave them together. And
Yeah.
when you're watching this show, you think 2 episodes in, I could have condensed this into like 60 minutes.
Yeah.
We've got some needless complication. Uh, we don't understand character motives. Things
Yeah.
just happen because we need the story to progress, which is very unfortunate. So I will give you a couple of examples. So, example one, we see Ahsoka arrive on that desert planet. She finds the object. For her to find that object, she had to rotate the pillars to make them feel a certain way. She was using like the Force to kind of guide her, like that Force echo that
Yeah.
Cal kind of uses. So she's got this Force echo going, and she can rotate those pillars, and she gets the ball, the object of the MacGuffin. And it's like, cool, okay, I can't do this. I need to get Sabine's help. Okay, why? Like, what's special about Sabine that she's going to help you with this? Now, I know Sabine's smart. She had a set of skills. She developed like a weapon that could destroy Beskar armor or Mandalorians. Like, that was her whole shtick back in the Clone Rebels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I know she's smart, but this ultimately turns into like a Rubik's Cube. And you wonder, did your Force Echo just not work here, Ahsoka?
Yeah.
Like, you just rotated those pillars, so why didn't you just try rotating this
Well,
ball? Uh,
Morgan's the Night Sister now. Commander Morgan's the Night Sister
uh,
now. The Magistrate. So maybe she put a spell on it to stop the Force Echo
mate,
thing from working.
it's just, what are we doing? So we've
Yeah.
got that going on, and it's like, okay, so why do you need Sabine? And because what Sabine does doesn't look very complicated,
No,
you just
the
think,
pattern of that ball is simple. I'm sure
yeah.
anyone with some basic cognitive function would be able to figure out how to make that a unified pattern.
So it's purely just to get Sabine involved. It's like, we don't know
Yeah.
why we need Sabine to do it. Like, you've got the Republic, the New Republic at your disposal. You're friends with a general of the New Republic. Like, explain to me you don't trust the New Republic, and I can go with that. Like,
Yeah.
let me know there's traitors in the New Republic and you're a bit sketchy about who you trust with this information. Because if this falls into the wrong's hands, then you've just given the Empire the keys to Thrawn.
Yeah.
Do you get what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, give me a reason why you're not going to use more resources and you're going to go to Sabine. Uh, Now, I know, like, it's a path to Ezra, but again, why Sabine and not someone else? Because she
Yeah.
acknowledges it's a path to Ezra, but also to Thrawn.
Yeah.
Like, and I need to make sure this doesn't exist. And do you know what would be a really good way of doing that? Just destroy it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ezra, but I can stop a war by, just crunching this
Yeah.
ball up.
That
Game
would have
over.
been a really good that would have been a really good bloody plot point. You're actually doing a better job of the writing
Like,
than Filonis. That would have been an awesome
that.
little arc of and a proper moral quandary. Like, we could get Ezra back, but we could also bring back Thrawn.
But
Maybe we should just destroy it.
even if Sabine was with her at that time, like, Sabine isn't on Lothor. Sabine starts on the ship with Ahsoka, and she's the one piloting the ship when Ahsoka jumps onto it, and not the robot dude. So it's like, oh, they're
Yeah.
working together. Like, that makes sense. It's like, we found it, the path to, like, Ezra. And it's like, or Thrawn. It's like, if this falls into the wrong hands, it's like, okay, we'll speak to Hera. But then you can have Hera be like, there's some dodgy things not going right for us at the moment. And it's like, okay, you build up this tension, and then it's like, well, do we risk it? And Sabine's like, absolutely. The way Rebels ended was Sabine like, I'm gonna find Ezra.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm down with that. Like, I could understand her wanting to do it and be like, I can do this without bringing Thrawn back. Like, trust me. And it's like, but Ahsoka, because she's not as full of life anymore, can be like, what about the needs of the many? It's about the greater
Yeah.
good here. Like, you can have that drama instead of being like, hello, master. hello, former
Yeah,
apprentice. Like something we've never really seen, never really asked for, never really cared
yeah,
for. And
yeah,
it's like you just add more meat to the drama without it feeling forced. And that way you do have
yeah.
Sabine legging it with the ball, trying to figure it out.
You should
And
have wrote this. You should have wrote these episodes, pal.
and then she gets ambushed and it's like, okay, chickens have come home to roost now. Like you should have worked together, you split up as a costly
Yeah,
mistake. But
yeah. Throw on his back.
that was just one element because the next element is okay, Sabine lost the ball in the map and she's got no record of it, which is amazing. And you think, okay, so you've lost your only way to follow the thread, follow the Empire. You're basically screwed. But because when Sabine got attacked, she got attacked by two droids. One droid, she shot him in the leg and blew his leg off. And he was out of commission, so to speak. And the other one grabbed the ball, destroyed the place, and legged it. Yes? Now,
Yeah,
the one she shot in the leg decided to stick around in the hut and just stay there for no apparent reason. Didn't try to escape. He had the time to escape. Uh, didn't get picked up. He just stayed there. And apparently it was to just ambush anyone who showed up. But these are the same type of droids we saw at the beginning of the episode that tried to blow Ahsoka up. I was like, you wanted to leave no trace of this ball in the map? Blow yourself up at Sabine's hut and it's game over. Like you're not being traced.
yeah.
Like
It's
I
contrived, and it's the same. It's this. I feel the same with Shin, like having more than enough time to finish off Sabine, and just like, no, Sabine's got to live, so I'll run away.
she when she stabs Sabine, she doesn't even have to pull her hand back. Just lift it up and it's game over.
Yeah,
Like you stab her nicely to pull the blade back. It's like
yeah,
uh, if I stab someone, I'm not pulling it back. I'm just lifting it up.
yeah, exactly. And there's false drama as well, like with the bomb. It's these contrived moments, where the head's gonna blow up.
Yeah,
They're like, just we could relocate to the droid who you really like and I really like
yeah.
makes a very sensible suggestion. Let's move somewhere that's a bit more bomb-proof. Like, no, there's no time. We have to do it here. Just do it in a hospital, where there's
But
sick people. Yeah, and it
look,
might blow up and blow the building smithereens. That sounds like a real good guy thing to do. That
look at
just so forced.
sorry, look at the cause and effect of actions.
Yeah,
So why they were needed, what did they result in? So Sabine gets attacked and a droid stays there. What is the effect of that droid staying there? We need it so we can follow the story.
yeah.
Like
Well, that's the
that's
rule number one in writing. Something shouldn't happen just because the plot demands it.
yeah.
That's
So
the
that's one flag. Okay, so this droid has a self-destruct and it will blow up. I was like, okay, why didn't he just blow himself up earlier then? Like, you shot his leg and his buddies abandoned him, but now he's deciding, oh, I'm gonna do it. If the droid was decommissioned and didn't attack Ahsoka, okay, I'll buy it. Like if she just went back to Sabine's place and the droid was just lying on the floor dead and she just chops its head off and brings it back, I'm okay
yeah.
with that because it's been decommissioned, it's not active. So I was like, okay, you're plugging him back up and then he's gonna activate his self-destruct. I can buy this. Do you get what I mean? But
Yeah.
but like we need an action beat here. So Ahsoka's gonna slice it up. Look how cool Ahsoka is. But you think, but why is the droid there?
Oh God, yeah, I'm with you on that. Like rule of cool moments in this show
And
really
then
do my head in. Do you remember
there's
the thing with the lightsabers on the floor where she used the force to cut a hole in the floor? And I always think with rule of cool moments, it's a rule of cool moment if you ask yourself who was it for, and if the only answer is for the viewer, it's an unneeded, it's unnecessary, and it becomes cringy and lame. Like I'd have been so much more happy if she just stuck a blade in the ground and like drew a hole
yeah,
around her and then fell in.
keep
Because
it
who was it for?
simple.
Like move. Well, yeah, exactly. Like moves like that are again like in real sword fighting. Like you can spin and flourish your blade, and do elaborate acrobatic movements. But there's a purpose to it. Those did happen in sort of historical fighting. It was to intimidate and show off to your opponent. If you're on your own, why are you going to flourish and do these intricate things? Oh, for the viewer. And it moves into the realm of lame for me when that happens.
Then
But yeah, that droid,
then you
it was a rule of cool moment.
you start to ask, why doesn't she just use that lightsaber to fling it at the bad guys when they try to escape on the ship?
Yeah,
Like, you just saw him throw his lightsaber. Why don't you just throw yours? You just shown us you
yeah,
can use it without your hands. Uh,
yeah.
and they have these action beats that are mandatory action beats that we
Mm.
just need a set piece. So,
It's like to try and it's like a dead person, isn't it? Or someone whose heartbeat is like gradually slowing down, and they're going to die, and they keep like
yep,
smacking it with a defibrillator to a defibrillator. I can't say that word. They keep smacking it with one of those electrical things, Tom, that like
defibrillator.
resets the heart.
So,
Yeah,
but
resets the
that's
heartbeat.
what I'm saying. When you open up and you understand the beats they're going for, it starts to really stick out like a sore thumb because you think this is just an action beat because we've had too much like talking scenes. Action beat.
Yeah.
Action beat is like, okay, what about a sense of wonder? Because I didn't get
Mm,
that from this show. The closest
no.
sense of wonder I got was when you saw the star map and it drawing a line. Uh, I'm really confused how these star maps are supposed to work.
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't know yet.
I tried not to think too much about it because I was thinking only in Disney era Star Wars do we have star maps for people who don't want to be found.
Yeah.
I was like, this is whack. And then you think,
Yeah.
okay, but it's not a map to Thrawn, it's a map to the galaxy. It's like, so how do they know where Thrawn is then? It was like, is the next
Yeah.
galaxy really tiny?
Yeah.
I was like,
It's
why are you so confident Thrawn is where this map is? Uh,
we are we're diving deep now.
it, it-
Um
but this
yeah,
is
no, I agree.
these are natural questions I always assume the audience should be asking.
Yeah.
Because there's maps like, how does this map work? Like, did he know he was going to end up there? Like,
That
oh,
that's something again, you can rewrite this to make more sense, and that is instead of it being some dumb star map to an exact galaxy, it could be a contingency message from Thrawn, like, if I'm ever captured or, you know, forced into exile, I'm gonna make it towards these coordinates or something like that,
like,
you know?
how much? God, the audience are going to be like, what is this guy talking about if they watch this podcast episode? Uh, how much has been planned? So,
Yeah.
the, I'm calling her the Baroness because I really can't keep up with what her name is. Uh, did you say Morgan?
Magistrate. Magistrate Morgan.
Yeah, magistrate. There we go. So, was the magistrate always imagined as a former night sister?
No,
I was like,
definitely not.
I don't think so either. Uh, and he directed that episode of The
Yeah.
Mandalorian. So it's not
Like,
as if it was a different director. It's like,
yeah.
okay. It's like, no, you directed that episode. You could have added in some green magic and everyone would have been like jizzing their pants. Like,
Yeah.
it's like,
Like, I thought she was,
okay.
I thought they were gonna canonize, like, the Achani, which were, like,
Mm,
martial artists who could fight Force wielders.
yeah.
Um, that's what I thought she was because there was no hint towards her being a Night Sister whatsoever. But in retrospect, it kinda makes me think, oh, well, at least, that's maybe why Ahsoka struggled a little bit to defeat her
Yeah.
because obviously she's got a bit of the Force herself, even though it's used in, like, a different way. So through retroactive continuity, but no, I guarantee you that that was not planned.
But,
I do like Magistrate Morgan, I
mm,
have to say. I don't like her when she's trying to be all mystical and like a witch, but I think the actress does convey a certain presence. Even when she's disheveled, you still know that this is someone not to mess with.
the,
Um,
sorry, the element bow that I'm thinking of,
yeah.
uh, I spoke about this earlier. You know the Mace Windu episode with Jar Jar? and he fights
Yeah.
Mother Talzin on that
Yeah.
place, yeah, and it sends like a signal into the sky, and somebody gets zapped by it. I was like, oh, is that the same kind of deal with that now? I was like, oh, okay. I could see some retroactive stuff for the Rebels, well, Clone Wars episodes that nobody watched and remembered, but okay. I only watched it because he had to make a video on that part, uh,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. There's these weird nuggets as well. So you know the hyperdrive coil they got?
Yeah.
Apparently that's an SSD class hyperdrive coil.
Right.
So Super Star Destroyer. And when they said that, I was like, huh? Like, how many of these things did the Empire have like floating around?
Yeah, I'm sure there was only supposed to be one.
I know in like old canon there's more, but that's old canon where they get a bit stupid. Uh,
Yeah.
but in modern canon, it's like there's just the Executor. So
Yeah.
like you had more, like, huh? And in my head, I was like, fuck it. That's just a ooh to give like a
Yeah.
sense of scale. And this will go into where I think it's going later on. It was just a weird nugget they added in. It's like couldn't just be like any hyperdrive coil. It's like it's an SSD hyperdrive coil. Gives it the sense
Yeah.
of scale. But I have no idea the state of the galaxy.
Yeah, you
Like,
don't get it feels like the Empire can kind of just is kind of knocking around and kind of just acting
like
with almost impunity.
if you're so embedded on Corellia, why have you got dumb asteroids that are gonna rat you out?
Yeah.
Like, the fuck?
Yeah,
I was like,
that's another contrived like, I had a little list of, like, the contrived moments. That's yet another contrived moment. What was Ahsoka and, Hera gonna do if the droid didn't, like, just all of a sudden grass them up?
it's
I
it
you know?
literally, it's if there's no droid there, this is a wrap.
Yeah.
It's like anybody at the computer stations could have just been like, "Oh no, nothing's here."
Let's shut that droid down, you know?
Yeah, and that was stupid. That was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
uh, because the only reason they got any further was because a droid started blabbing, and then apparently that guy is the Empire or isn't the Empire. They're trying to deal with. They did this in the Mandalorian season 3, where I said in Andor they would have tackled these elements much better.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they
I have
don't,
my gripes with that show, but yeah,
yeah, they don't
absolutely.
care about the Empire. They're greedy. They want to be rich. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, like that's a bit clunky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like Andor, instead of like explicitly saying like they don't care about the Empire, they just want to be rich, they would have shown you a bit more depth, a bit more detail of how this is all working, coming together. Like, could you imagine us seeing a scene of this rogue faction or the Imperial Remnant than like Andor, where they're doing the ISB, where it'd be like,
Yeah.
we need to get this guy back on a ship. He needs to be dead. He needs to be planted. Like the cogs of the machine turning. Because I've said this before, Andor, Star Wars looks at the overall picture, the mythical picture, the hero's journey. Yes,
Yeah.
Andor is about how you radicalize a rebellion, how
Yeah.
a radicalized rebellion further disenfranchise people under the Empire to be against you. Because we have Andor and the police guy go on parallel journeys where one has strengthened resolved in the Empire after all he's been through.
Yeah.
Because of how Andor's affected him, and he's like, "We need justice. We need stability. The Empire's the way to go. I need to bring these guys to justice." Whilst Andor, on his path, he's like, "The Empire's bad. They are just like
Yeah.
fascists." And it's like
Yeah.
there's this fascinating journey and comparison between the two. And I say it's about looking at the macro of it all. So instead of like the overarching like hero's journey. It's like these are the cogs that help the rebellion or the empire move,
Yeah,
like the cogs to the machine.
definitely.
Whilst with Ahsoka, it's like, okay, this show's about Ahsoka, but they try and talk about deeper themes, but they just don't have the power to.
They
And
don't
it,
have the chops.
yeah,
Filoni doesn't have the writing chops to do like I said earlier, like Game of Thrones
mm,
style intricacy. Like Andor, like we'll do a podcast on it one day. Andor, I don't particularly like Andor, but one thing I will say is that the writing is pretty spot on.
mm.
And it's intricate. It pulls it off. It gives you that Game of Thrones in Star Wars that
But
itch that some people wanted scratched.
it's the right level of detail for the story they're trying to tell.
Yeah, Ahsoka
Whilst,
doesn't. It doesn't know what it wants to do. That's how I feel. Like it's not a hero's journey because Ahsoka has already completed it. Ahsoka's a master now.
yep,
It just feels to me like that's what they're pushing Sabine to be. I suppose. Like we'll talk about where it's going in a second because I think we've
yep.
gone way past the hour point. But I think that's a big part of this story. Is it's all about just getting Thrawn.
Mm,
That's the
that's
selling point of this show. It's all about let's try and stop Thrawn arriving, but obviously Thrawn is coming back because he's Thrawn, Revan, and Luke. They're the golden childs of Star Wars. You know what I mean?
but
You can't go wrong.
that's all I'm waiting for though,
Yeah,
is Thrawn.
me too. Me
And
too. I like Ahsoka. I don't hate her, but I'm not. I don't care. I don't care about her and Sabine training to be Jedi. You've promised me Thrawn. You've promised me heir to the Empire level storytelling. Give me that.
and uh that's my problem with it all is we want to get to Thrawn. Is Thrawn going to be in it in the last half an hour of the episode?
Yeah, I
If
I genuinely think. Like we'll move on. We'll move
okay,
on
yeah,
to
let's
where
go
we
into
think
where we
it's
think
going.
it's going. So where
Oh
we
no,
think it's going.
one last thing that I didn't like because I know you had thoughts on this too was I think that this looks very clean. It doesn't look lived in
Mm,
like on the visual front because you're a film buff,
yeah.
Tom, and you're a film editor, so you got to give a bit about this. But like the visuals are really, it's annoying me a little bit. Like they're reminding me of the prequels. Like the prequels look quite sterile and
Yeah.
quite shiny, but that is 20 years ago, and back then that technology was like,
Okay.
absolutely mind-blowing and revolutionary. In this day and age, we need that. Like Mandalorian, like you said before the podcast, Mandalorian season 1, it brought back that like original trilogy. This world is dirty and gritty and lived in. Whereas this season, it's so clean, and the lighting, whoever's doing the lighting needs to tone it down a little bit, I
So
think.
I think the best way to describe this, and I'm not sure if it's a limitation of the volume. If you don't know what the volume is, it's like the creation that they've got at ILM. It's digital film production where they'll have some real live pieces on the ground. So, say if you've got a rock and the Mandalorian sitting on the rock, instead of
Yeah,
a green screen background, it's a digital screen that's
yeah,
synced with the camera. So when the camera moves, the volume in the background will move the background to match. And it's actually live action. So it's a big TV screen, for example,
yeah.
that's got the environment there. So that's really handy for the Mandalorian because he's got such reflective armor. Trying to do a chroma key on him would be horrendous because of like of a green spell. Uh, but it's really innovative technology, and the Mandalorian was a big breakthrough for that use. Now, the problem is, as I say, it's a big screen and it's sometimes circular around the back. And you build these sets, and then instead of a green screen, you just have that. But then you'll get green screen sets with Star Wars where you're like, green screen, green screen, green screen, green screen,
Yeah.
where you can figure out like that's where the set extension is. I always play the game of the Mandalorian. It's like, where's the set end and the screen starts? Because you'll see they often get centered in the frame and they don't like move within the environment. So on Ahsoka, you imagine, okay, the set is the little round part where she's just cut a hole into it. That's the set. And everything around that is probably a screen. And you start to play the game, and you think, okay, well, they're not lighting it for a green screen, but benefits of this volume is it emits light to match. So say if it's a sunny day, it should be emitting the light to match a sunny day.
Yeah.
But I feel like everything's so shiny and stale because they're all on this volume set and there's nothing else to interact with. Whilst if you look at, sorry, Andor again, sometimes they take the time to go to locations.
Yeah.
So on Andor, you had the location of the dam. That's an actual
Yeah.
real life location. It's up in Scotland. They use locations in London for the ISB base or when they're meeting around in the cityscape because you can see like the brick texture. But there's just something about those shots that open up different angles.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's something I would never slag off about Andor. Set scouts, they needed awards.
Yeah. Now, it would be wrong to criticize Mandalorian from like, we've got a workflow that works for us. But then you start to think, you might notice this now, and you'll be like, God, we never go off into the edges. So, you know, when we're at Sabine's place, it feels like there's a little barrier. Like, imagine a video game where you can see like the
Yeah, like an
background, but you
invisible
can't
wall.
approach it. You'll see
Yeah.
it, and they always shoot things from like this similar angles, and they never like venture off this path. And it does get jarring. And when you watch it, I'll be curious if you start to notice it now. It's like, oh my
Yeah,
God, if I imagine there's
probably
just a
will
disc
now.
and we can't get past that. It can be a huge set though, so don't get me wrong. But they will just do things where instead of having the ship in the background, it's now just on the volume and the ship's digitally placed.
Yeah.
It's fascinating technology, but
Oh, right.
just feels a bit
Interesting.
stale, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
because you want them to open it up.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it for me, it's not there yet. Like it's like the prequels. It's like the technology was almost there, but it's not quite
No,
there to make it like a
it's
believable
so
lived-in world.
it's there. Like, trust me, it's there. It's just they haven't got the right things happening. So, House of the Dragon, I slated House of the Dragon uh, for some of its dragon riding effects because I was saying they didn't have the physical elements going on to match what we were seeing.
Yeah,
But they fixed that for the final episode of House of the Dragon where Lucerys gets attacked by Aemond. And they've got the wind machines going, the rain. Like, it looks like it's interacting with them, but they're on a big blue screen or volume. And it's selling the picture of a storm. Whilst now it's like, there's nothing happening. Like, there's
yeah,
no air interacting with people. It's minor things, but it's like when you see people on a train, like a train heist, and they're walking across the train and barely a hair's flickering. It's like, get fucked. Because if you watch Mission Impossible, when he's on a train, he looks like he's going to fucking fly off. Like, the force is so strong on them. It's like they forget parts of the physics to affect him to
yeah.
make the character still look good. It's like, no, show me how intense this is.
It kind of it does make you kind of makes you miss George Lucas and his nitpicking a little bit. Like in the prequels, like when they were animating Yoda, like they had to like ask him down to like what color is Yoda's blood, so that when we do his little blood vessels in his ears, that. But it's little things like that, you know, like his ear hairs and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Does make me miss George and his sort of like, even though they weren't perfect, but like his version of perfectionism. Let's move on to where we think it's going then, Tom. Where do you think
Okay.
Ahsoka is going?
So, my theory, the hyperspace ring, it's got an SSD engine. I was wondering, it's got one SSD engine. I'm assuming like all parts of the engine sections on there have like multiple SSD engines or hyperspace coils. And
Yeah.
we've seen this technology before. like Attack of the Clones with Obi-Wan, where he needed like a hyperspace ring for his fighter.
Yeah.
Uh, so my theory is, if the ring's big enough, are they going to find Thrawn's Star Destroyer and hook it up and bring it back? Or are they taking a bigger ship to get Thrawn? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's that would be interesting. I mean, the Chimera is kind of it's well, it's not iconic, but it's like recognizable, isn't
Hmm.
it? Because of it's like artwork on it and
Yeah.
stuff. Would be cool to see the Chimera in live action, so that kind of makes sense.
And
Um,
that's
yeah,
what I'm referring to is like, oh, would they bring that back that way? That's the thing I'm thinking they will do. But then I'm thinking maybe they take a ship and hook it up and they take a ship to Thrawn instead of bringing Thrawn's ship back. And it's
yeah.
undecided.
I see. I kind of like the idea of them bringing it sort of like being like a magnet to pull Thrawn back, rather than them take it. Because then you get there's got to be like some super plot
Okay.
contrived
So,
ways for Ahsoka and Sabine and whoever else is going on the adventure to this new galaxy. There's got to be a contrived way for them all to be on the ship.
mm,
Because if that ring goes once, it's only obviously going to fire once, isn't it? They're not going to be able to like,
bro,
follow it.
whales.
Oh no!
You just, they've been showing these pictures of whales so often, and you saw them in Mandalorian season 3. I'm just waiting
Yeah,
for them to be like, oh no, they've gone. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we know a way to get to the whales and the whales can take us. It's like,
no, please no.
maybe they stow away on the hyper ring. Uh,
I'd rather that than the stupid space whales. I like the idea of those space whales as their own thing when they're left alone. You know, like when Grogu sees
yeah.
them. I like that. I like that sort of Lovecraftian. The universe is bigger than you realize. Sort of
Mm,
well, Lovecraftian is like it's hopeless, but that's a bit more optimistic. But you know that sort of the universe is bigger than you realize sort of
yeah.
tone that those whales bring. I like that. I don't like it when Ezra and people start bloody interacting with them. Just leave them alone.
Okay,
I
Greenpeace.
yeah. I am so my theory is that and it's I don't even think it's much of a theory to be honest. I've got a strong feeling that that Inquisitor character was Ezra.
That's so
I, d- I,
stupid.
d- I just, but it's Filoni. It's stupid enough to be right.
Bro,
That's the thing.
I've I've heard this theory and I'm like, yeah, fucked.
Yeah, I genuinely think that the writing is dumb enough for that to be the case, and there's going to be this scene where Sabine and that Inquisitor fight, and she's going to cut his helmet off, and oh, it's Ezra. I'm telling you. Like, I think I think from what I've seen of the show so far, because we always base these where we're going on what I've seen. So I think the show's writing is dumb enough for that to be the case.
If you could see my
Um,
face, I'm literally just shaking it. Like,
yeah.
no. Like, I've heard this one and I'm thinking,
Dumb,
that's
dumb. For it's
stupid.
not they're not that
Like,
dumb.
who
Yeah,
would even. The first question would be, and they'd have to answer it in the same episode, is like, why is Ezra here and not with Thrawn?
oh yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's stupid. That's the thing. I do think it's stupid, pal. I just think the show's writing is stupid enough to make that a thing. That's my impression. It was just the way he was standing and his sort of movements, and obviously he looks similar-ish in build to the hologram we saw. It's not much to go off, but yeah, I just think the show is dumb enough for
God.
that to be the case.
I know it's late in England right now, but
Yeah.
bro. No.
um, I also think that Thrawn is going to be like the finale, and he's just gonna show up. I don't think that we're gonna get anything resembling some time with this character. I really hope I'm wrong, and I mean we have been wrong, like with
Oh
these where
yeah.
we think it's going. We weren't too bad on the first half of the season of The Mandalorian, but God, those later episodes we were like, Thrawn's gonna show up and he's gonna wipe the Mandalorians out. Um, yeah, I really hope I'm wrong, but I don't think we're gonna get much of Thrawn from what I've seen. The story is moving far too slow. We're a quarter of the way through, like you say, and yeah,
Mm,
there's going to be all sorts of exposition. I think there's going to be an episode where Sabine and Ahsoka are like training. Um, Maybe an episode where Hera gets the gang back together. You know, because like why was Zeb in that bar? It's so that he was there, so that we can, because obviously the Mandalorian and Ahsoka and that all tied together. It's so that we know that Zeb's still knocking about, so that Hera can go and get him to, come and help. Um,
One quick thing
yeah.
before I forget. Speaking of the Phoenix crew, how bad did that little painted mural look?
Oh,
That thing looked horrific. It's
yeah.
like these guys are animated characters. Like, just copy and
Yeah.
paste to us from mural. What the fuck were you doing? Like, this looks horrendous. Like, you see
Yeah.
Hera's like face, and it's like, God, she got fat shamed, so she's really skinny now because her face and her
Yeah.
pain's like really round. I was like, Hera doesn't even look like that in a show, like the animated show.
No. No.
Uh,
No.
but
I think that's gonna happen. I think the Phoenix crew is gonna get back together because why was Zeb in that bar in The Mandalorian? That's what I
mm,
think anyway. So I think Phoenix crew gets back together. I think we're gonna have an episode where Ahsoka trains Sabine again. Um, I really hope I'm wrong, and I genuinely do, just because I don't want them to fuck them up anymore. But I don't want Boba Fett, and I don't want Mando and Grogu to show up.
I
Um, I, I, I really don't want the Mando and Grogu to show up at all. I know they're going to show up in the film that ties them all together, but
yeah.
I don't want them to. I'm really happy just sitting here thinking Mando has got lighter bounty hunting work, and he's on his farm with his adopted son, and they're just chilling. I genuinely am happy for their story to end there.
I
But I think we're gonna get a cameo. I think we're gonna get
uh,
them.
we'll see. We'll have to see because to me this is a straightforward story where it's like you got a map, you need to follow the map. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
how are you gonna bring other characters into it?
Well, what about if the next little MacGuffin requires 3 Force users, and Ahsoka's like, "Oh, I've got myself, I've got Luke, but I need that third Force user. Oh, let's go. Let's pay Mando a visit and get Grogu to help."
I just
Um, I can think of contrived ways to get him in.
yes, but there's a lot of weird things happening in the Mandalorian universe where you got these magic maps, yes? And then
Yeah.
in Mandalorian season 2, you had the magic stone that Grogu sits on to, oh, tell people he's a Force user. Huh? Do
Yeah.
you get what I mean? Uh,
Mm,
and then he was so tired from it. I was like, so what was that for?
mm.
I was like, okay, maybe they'll be like, oh, we're gonna put Grogu and amplify his powers so we can find things. Because he's sort of a whale. I could totally guess they'd use Grogu to interact with the whales and
Well,
to latch
they've
onto stuff.
established they've established that Grogu has an affinity with animals. Like that's a strong fit. That's a theme I really like with the
Yeah.
Mandalorian as well. That's not something I'm slagging off. They have made extra effort to show that Grogu's very good with animals um, and beasts, apart from the ones he eats. But but in general, like big monsters, he just seems to have an affinity with. Luke's obviously going to show up. That's another thing. I think it's where it's going. I think we're
Hmm.
going to get the de-aged Luke.
I'm
Um,
curious what the next iteration of Luke looks like.
yeah,
Because I thought Book of Boba Fett Luke looked great.
yeah,
I thought, damn, they've come such a long way between End of Mandalorian to Book of Boba Fett. It's insane. Uh,
yeah.
I was very impressed with that. And I thought, instead of giving these story beats to other characters, you can literally bring in Luke Skywalker and he looks convincing enough where I'm like, bro. And you did it for a lengthy period. Like a good chunk of that episode of Book of Boba had Luke in it.
Yeah,
Uh, I was like, is it a budget thing, a cost thing? Like, we can wheel out Luke.
yeah,
uh,
yeah. I think they will. I think Filoni will have pulled out all the stops. I think whatever he can shove in a reference to and whatever he can bring, he'll bring it. And
what?
I think we'll get Mando and Grogu. I don't think we'll get Boba Fett, but I do think we'll get Mando and Grogu somehow. And I think Luke's a given for me because we're getting Anakin, aren't we?
Oh,
That's another thing.
really?
Getting flashbacks, yeah.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah.
It's
So
like,
Hayden Christensen's come back. So
I don't know why. I can't
yeah,
wait. It's going to be the same fucking shitty circle set from Obi-Wan, isn't it?
yeah,
You know, where the only times you'd see Jedi was in like this courtyard.
yeah,
It's like that circular courtyard. It's like, oh, look, Attack on Jedi Temple. The kids are training in this courtyard. Oh, look, Obi-Wan and Anakin are training in this little weird circular courtyard. It's like, do we only have one fucking set?
yeah.
Jesus. Um,
Yeah, no, it is from what I saw. It's on that courtyard set as well. You've made a joke about it, but I actually genuinely think it is on that set. Um, so yeah, that's where I think it's going. I think we're gonna get a lot of filler episodes, and we're gonna get a lot of exposition, and we're gonna have these characters. But the Phoenix Crew's getting back together.
hmm.
I think Luke's popping his head in. He might even pop his head in to try and like train Sabine a bit. And Mando and Grogu will pop their heads in as well. And we're not going to get Thrawn till that last episode, and it's going to be like a cliffhanger. That's
They
that's where I think it's going.
next week better have some movement. Like
Yeah,
proper movement, proper story, no convoluted actions, just off we go, ladies and gents. They've got the tracking
yeah,
beacon on that ship.
yeah,
Let's see how that works.
yeah.
Uh, Speaking of, what would you rate the
Yeah.
episode?
So these two episodes, so we'll rate them together like with
Yeah.
one score. 4. I wanna like smack it in the middle and say 5, but then Sabine just really got on my nerves, and there were just the things that I loved about the episode are quite harshly overshadowed by the things that I hate. Um, not enough going on. Like I always give things points for what's in it. I mean, Ahsoka was in it, so you got to give it at least a 1. And that Thrawn was mentioned. I give it another point for that. We got to see the Phoenix Crew. I give it another point, but I don't. There's just nothing going on to score, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it sits at about a 4 for me out of 10. Absolutely, 4
I
out of 10.
I thought 5 would have been reasonable because it wasn't a great start. You couldn't put it any higher because you if this is the best episode, then this show is a shit show. Uh
Yeah,
it's it's weird, isn't it?
yeah,
Okay, so 4 out of 10. I'm gonna put 5 on the picture for shits and giggles, but fair enough.
yeah,
Hopefully next week's episode is much better. Because Andor for me had a rocky start. I'm gonna rewatch that show
yeah,
shortly, see if the start is still rocky or if it's better on a rewatch. But
yeah,
I'm just hoping for the best that this was a rocky start and they're firing on all
yeah,
cylinders next week. But past this prologue.
yeah.